And with that, let us now open our word at Isaiah chapter 6. That was already read by our elder Verghese. We're going to delve into certain parts of it that we have not yet touched. Isaiah says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on the throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphs, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces. With 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying, and they were calling one to another, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory.' At the sound of their voices, the doorpost thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. 'Woe to me,' I cried. 'I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King and the Lord Almighty.' Then one of the seraphs flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, 'See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for.' Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here am I, send me.'" Turn with me, if you would, to Revelation. For those of you who don't know where Revelation is, it would be just before Genesis. If the Bible was circular, it would in fact be just before Genesis. Read with me Revelation 15. Revelation chapter 15. This is John now. "I saw in heaven a great and marvelous sign. 7 angels with 7 last plagues. Last, because with them God's wrath is completed. And I saw what looked like a sea of glass mixed with fire. And standing beside the sea, those had been victorious over the beast and his image, and over the number of his name. They held harps given them by God, and sang the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. Great and marvelous are your deeds, Lord God Almighty. True, just and true are your ways, King of the ages. Who will not fear you, O Lord, and bring glory to your name? For you alone are holy. All nations will come and worship before you, for your righteous acts have been revealed." After this, I looked, and in heaven the temple, that is the tabernacle of the testimony, was opened. Out of the temple came 7 angels with the 7 plagues. They were dressed in clean, shining linen with golden sashes around their chest. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls filled with the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one could enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. Here we have another picture of God in the temple. In Isaiah, we see God on his throne, and his robe is encompassing and covering the entire temple. Then there are seraphs, and the seraphs obviously are at the mercy seat, the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat and the law, crying, "Holy, holy, holy." And seeing this, what happens to Isaiah? He's unclean. I am unclean. And the angels there cover their eyes and their feet. Who is able to be in the presence of God justly? When God is holy, unholy cannot be there. Unholy cannot be in the presence of the holy God. Therefore Isaiah says, "Woe unto me, because I'm a man of unclean lips. I cannot be or even look upon the presence of God." In Revelation chapter 15, we have a whole bunch of people, thousands and thousands of people, And they've got harps. And they're where? In the presence of God. Singing songs. How is it that they can be there and others cannot? Let's look at that today. In Isaiah, we talk about the holiness of God, which then covers all of the other attributes of God. You can take and study any attribute of God, and it becomes meaningless and imperfect unless it is covered and wrapped in the holiness of God. The holiness of God is all-encompassing. Today I want to take a look at two of these attributes of God. One is the justice of God. Justice of God. And the second is the mercy of God. What is justice? Anybody here been to court? Anybody been to court? You don't have to. Did you go to prison? You almost. No. Oh, okay. When you go to court, even if you go to court as a person who's complaining about somebody, it's still scary. If you have a lawsuit against somebody, it is still scary to go to court. But when you go to court, you demand what? Justice. You demand justice. Now, I have to go to court quite often. No, I don't. It's not from all the tickets. I have had tickets. I'll tell you a story about one ticket. When I was 16, I took a bunch of my friends and was driving my dad's car. We went north on Highway 400 all the way to a camp called Camp Frenda. On the way back, driving back, and got stopped by the police. They didn't have a radar or anything. They stopped me, a bunch of police cars and a bunch of cars they had stopped. And they said, you were driving 86 miles an hour. Back then it was miles. 86 miles. I said, what? How did you know that? He said, well, see, we had this airplane in the air, and we have these white lines on the highway, and they time how long it takes you to go from one line to the other, and they know how fast you're going. I said, 86 miles an hour. He gave me a ticket, big ticket. I took the ticket, said thank you, went home, never paid the ticket, forgot all about it. And a few months later, my dad said, Paige, he says, you were driving 86 miles an hour on the 400? I said, how did you know? He says, I got a letter from the driver's license place. You got a ticket. You didn't pay it. I said, oh. He said, it's okay. I paid it. And he went to court. He had to go. I didn't go. Because by the time he found out, it was too late to make a deal to pay it. He had to go to court. Had to pay it. So what is justice? When you demand or expect justice, it is this. When some wrong is done, that wrong has to be paid for by something that is equal. At least equal. So if you broke the law and you were driving 86 miles an hour and you had to pay a ticket, the ticket had to be paid. If not, you would lose the privilege to drive. Or worse. But when we consider God, I ask you, when we consider this God that we see in Isaiah, holy, 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 we see this God sitting on his throne, the Ark of the Covenant, where inside is the law. Do we dare demand justice? Do we? Is this a court where we can go before God and say, God, I demand justice here and now? What would happen to us if God was to give us justice? we would all die. You remember the story of Uzzah? Who was Uzzah? He was one of the Kohathites. And the Ark of the Covenant had been taken into captivity and held by pagans for many, many years. Eventually, Israelites got it back. They kept it in storage for a while. Then big celebration. They built the temple, the car, and the ark was going to be brought back. As they were bringing the ark back, they put it on a cart being pulled by oxen. They weren't supposed to do that anyways, because God had told them that the only way to transport the ark was with these long pieces of wood that would go through these rings, and it was to be carried. So they disobeyed God to begin with. They put it on this cart, and as they were going through an area where there was a threshing field, and it looked like the ark was going to fall. And Uzzah went to stop it from falling, to keep it from falling, so it would not get dirty on the dirt, on the ground, on the mud. Now, what happened to Uzzah? He died. What kind of God does that? What kind of God does that? What kind of God would kill a man for trying to help support the ark? Now, Kohathites, if you look at the 12 tribes of Israel, Levites were supposed to be the ones who looked after the temple and everything to do with the temple. Kohathites were the sons of Kohath, and their job was to look after everything to do with the ark. The Ark of the Covenant was the center of the temple, was a focal point of the temple. It was their job to make sure they focused on everything to do with it. So if there was anything to do with the ark, every child would know. Little children would be trained to understand the ark and better than anybody else. That was their family business, if you will. If you look at snake charmers in India, it's amazing. That little kids handling cobras. You seen that on YouTube? I love watching snake and animal videos, like my friend Cherry and Paul. The both of us, we love animal things on YouTube. I watch them all day long. You watch these little kids handling snakes. Ever since they're little, they're used to snakes, and their parents allow the snakes to go around them, and why? So they're not scared. When you have a family ancestral responsibility or a business, you're taught from the very beginning. And yet, what happened to Uzzah? Uzzah felt that he could go beyond what the law of God was and do what he was told not to do, regardless of his intention. We hear people say, oh, no, God doesn't look at the actions, he looks at our intention. Really? Really? You can worship God with whatever intention you may have, but if you're doing it in a way that God forbids, it's not worth anything. It is a sin. Aaron had sons Nadab and Abihu. Anybody know what happened to them? What happened to Elihu and Nadab? They got these holders of incense. They burnt incense in them, coals, and they put incense on them. The Bible tells us in Leviticus chapter 10 that they presented to this incense and these coals to the Lord in a way that was not sanctified, that was not approved by God. So now, what are they doing? Are they doing something evil? Are they out there killing people? Are they stealing things? Are they telling lies? Are they breaking any of the commandments? Are they committing adultery? What are they doing? They're worshiping. They're worshiping. They're just doing it a little differently. No big deal. What's the big deal? What did God do to them? They were killed on the spot in the temple. And before Aaron could get angry, Moses reminded him. Moses said to Aaron, you know what God said, so don't you dare complain. And he called the cousins of the boys, and they came and they carried them out, and they buried them outside the sacred burial ground. That is justice. Then what about you and me? If we worship God in ways that He doesn't want us to worship, is it possible? Is it possible that we stand before God in the justice of God and found guilty? Never mind this sin. What about others? Are we just? Are we righteous? We are not. Romans chapter 3. Go with me to Romans, if you will. Chapter 3. Verse 9. What shall we conclude then? Are we better? Not at all. We've already made the charge that Jews and Gentiles alike are all under sin. As it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands, no one who seeks God. All have turned away. How many have sinned? All have sinned. What is the wages of sin?
Death.
For the wages of sin is? Death. If the wages of sin is death, and if we demand justice of God, when we go into the most holy place, as we see in Isaiah, where the two cherubs are, and where God is in the temple, when we are there before God and we're demanding or expecting justice, what are we going to get? Death. Death. There is no other way out. Why is it that we would have to meet death? Because justice and absolute justice and perfect justice is an attribute of God. Let's call it holy justice. Holy justice. So if God is just and if God is perfect as we believe that He is, God is perfect. In His perfection, perfect justice would demand that every sinner pay the price. That is perfect justice. That is divine justice. Divine justice requires death. There is no way out of it. No way out of it. And if God is going to uphold justice, death is a requirement. And if God changes the rules and He cancels justice, says there is no more need for justice, what happens to His universe? Falls apart. And it gives up His godhood. God cannot lay aside justice. He is bound by His own justice. And because of it, when we became sinners through our ancestors, we are bound to death. And as such, we see in the year that King Uzziah died, he was before the Lord being measured by the justice of God. The throne upon which God sat had in it the law of God. The Ark of the Covenant had the law of God. And compared to that law of God, Uzziah stood in sin, although he considered himself righteous, and his people considered him righteous. But in the presence of God, there was no righteousness in him. And the law found him wanting. The law, the justice found him guilty. That is the perfect justice of God. That is what happens to us. If we go before God and demand justice on our own, that same God is now looking at Isaiah. And Isaiah sees this. what Uzziah saw and was part of in real life. Three-dimensional world. He was in the temple. Isaiah saw in vision. In vision, Isaiah was before the same throne where Uzziah was. And there we find Isaiah in a state not of justice, but of mercy. Mercy. The same God, the same holy God, has another attribute which we call mercy. Mercy of God. And the mercy of God is perfect. The mercy of God is complete. Sometimes we use the word mercy and grace interchangeably. But what's the difference? I'm going to take a break here. What is the change? Is there a difference in mercy and grace? All you theologians, Sneha, have you been studying the word studies at all? What's the difference in mercy and grace? Mercy and grace. Is there a difference? You know, a little louder. I'm getting deaf in my old age. Mercy is?
Pardon.
Okay.
And grace is a gift.
Uh-huh. Anybody else?
That we don't deserve.
Mercy is gentleness, if you will. Not giving you, in actual terms is this, mercy is not giving you something that you deserve for your badness, for your guilt, for your wrong. That is mercy. And what is grace? Giving you something just for the sake of giving it to you. Just to give it to you. Through the mercy of God, we experience the grace of His gift of righteousness. Through His mercy. This is an attribute of God that without which the whole world would be lost. And it is this attribute, in its wholeness, in its holiness, makes provision for us that we can appreciate and look forward to the justice of God. This is a God who takes unholy. When Moses asked God to see him, he said what? Nah. He says, I will make a little cleft in the rock, and I will hide you in that rock. And I will pass by, and you will only for a millisecond see a glimpse of my back. And from that, Moses entirely was glorified. And it was so bright that the people could not look upon his face. I would submit that any sinful being who sees the face of God or in the presence of God would die immediately. Immediately. Burn. Because sin cannot be where it's just complete holiness. But this God takes and He transforms it. He made a way. And this is the beauty of the gospel. This is where God made a second Adam. Where the first Adam sinned and brought sin upon all the descendants. God made a second Adam, Jesus Christ, through whom we now get holiness. We were sentenced to die because of what Adam did. But when God sent Jesus, a perfect, holy being, without sin, and if you like, we can get into a discussion about that later, about the holiness of Jesus Christ, how He was born holy. When we accept this Jesus Christ, when Jesus Christ was born, He was born holy. He lived a life of no sin, a righteous life. On the cross, when Jesus hung on the cross, He paid the price for sin. He paid that ticket. So God's justice was fulfilled in Jesus Christ. God was able to declare every sinner who accepted Jesus Christ righteous, because justice was paid by Jesus Christ. On the cross, Jesus fulfilled righteousness and Jesus fulfilled grace, both. On the one hand, he paid the price. On the other hand, it was the grace of God through his mercy, and grace and justice met at the cross and were both satisfied. They were both satisfied. My dad used to say, grace and justice were at enmity with each other. Grace and justice were enemies of each other until they met Jesus Christ on the cross of Calvary. There, grace and justice made friends with one another, and they shook hands. Where God took the unholy and made them holy. It's like coal. Coal. Do you know, you burn wood, or I used to be partners in a company that used to manufacture wood-burning stoves and insert. And so I have a bit of a background in understanding what wood-burning stoves are all about. And it's a pain in the neck. The idea that you should clean the ashes was the number one reason people don't like wood-burning stoves. The ashes and the coal. Nobody wants ashes. When in the Old Testament, even in the New Testament, when people were crying, something terrible happened, what did they do? They put coals and ashes on their head. It's not a good thing. But you take that same coal and you put it under certain temperatures and you put it under certain pressure and it becomes a diamond. The most precious thing on earth becomes a diamond. Jesus took that coal, that nasty, useless problem called sin, and under the pressure of his death, and pressure of the entire universe was on him at that time. And when he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" The heat of hell was upon him. And he took that coal and he made us into little diamonds. In Revelation 15 we just read, and if you read on further, with the 7 angels and the wrath of God, it talks about the wrath of God. Those that are sinners. Bible tells us when Jesus comes back, we will hear, "Those that are righteous, let them be righteous still. Those that are holy, let them be holy still." Here we are now at the end of time in the book of Revelation. And Jesus is forced before God to point to his left hand. Those that have not accepted Jesus, those that are still unrighteous. And he says to God, "Holy, holy, holy, meet unholy." And the unholy die in the fire of hell. He then turns around and he says, "Holy, holy, holy, meet holy." Jesus, and only Jesus, can make us fit to be in the presence of God. Amen. Only He. And when we recognize the holiness of God and our unholiness, when we accept Jesus Christ for everything that He is, everything that He did, everything that He's doing today, we can be part of those people about which we just read in Revelation 15, which said there were thousands upon thousands with their harps singing to God in the presence of God. without being burned by the glory of God. Now, friends, I want to take you to Hebrews chapter 4, if you will. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16. I'm going to go to verse 14, give us some context so we can appreciate our condition and our relationship with Jesus Christ. Therefore, since we have a great high priest, who has gone through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Story is told in the time of the Civil War in America, when a soldier got news that his father had died, his mother and sisters were at the farm, unable to take care of themselves or the farm, and were in deep trouble, and winter was coming. Soldier wanted to go home, but his superior said, no, he can't go. But he needed permission. The only way he could get permission now, he'd gone through all of the officers, was if he got permission from the president. So he made his way to the home of Abraham Lincoln. He sat there waiting for hours and hours and hours, days, next day on, crying there in front because nobody would let him in. Nobody would let him talk to the president. The son of Abraham Lincoln, we're told, him was Tad. He was playing outside. He saw the soldier crying. He says, what's wrong? The soldier told him the story. I need to go home. I need to go home. But the only one who can give me permission to go home is the president. The soldier did not know to whom he was speaking. The little boy said, come with me. He took the finger of the soldier and he walked past the guards. He walked past a second set of guards and the third. And then there was a closed door to a room where the president was in a meeting. As he approached the door, the soldiers flew the door open. The little boy took the soldier, walked right up to his dad. He said, Dad, the soldier needs to talk to you. That is what the Son of God does for us. Amen. When we need to go to God with faith, confidence that His mercy and grace will bring us home, we take the hand of Jesus Christ. And that is the only way that we can be in the presence of God. Amen. It is my hope that we will pray for one another as we advance in our spiritual life, that we may learn to love God with the deepest love, and through His transformation we may be able to worship Him in the way that He wants. And through that worship we can develop a relationship where we will be with God forever and eternity. It's my prayer for all of us. God bless you.
Amen.